It was the worst experience of my life. Those are the words of Liz Carlson, one of the trampers who stumbled across a mass whale stranding on Stewart Island. A rahui has been placed on remote Mason Bay after 145 pilot whales died. Fellow tramper Julian Ripoll ran 15 kilometres back to a dock hut to raise the alarm after the pair chanced on the dead and dying animals. Liz explained to me earlier this afternoon how the horrible situation unfolded.
We were all the way at the far end of Mason's Bay, out actually on these islands that you can only access at really low tide, and like catching impala and like taking photos and everything. And then we came back along the same path and we saw them, and we first thought they were seals, and then when we realized they were whales, we just like dropped everything and ran in the water with them. And that was the first group. That was like about 35 whales, and then and I actually didn't see the second group until the next day, but when Julian was running back is when he found the second pod of 100 whales also, and they were both in the surf. They weren't in the sand yet, they were just stuck in the surf.
So when you first went into the water and you were trying to help these whales, you obviously then realised it was futile, you couldn't do anything. So how did you decide that Julian would go off and run for help?
Well, we had like called in and chatted with some dock rangers that were working in the area the day before, and so we knew that they were there, and I thought they would have a radio because it's such a remote location. So I mean, we didn't have any other options, and we both sort of knew without even saying that we couldn't just like go back to the camp and not tell anyone, but it was so hard because we'd already been doing several days of big hikes during the day, so we were absolutely shattered.
So how far do you reckon it was that he ran back to the hut?
I reckon it would have been about 15 Ks. It would have taken us almost 4 hours walking from where we were during the day.
And so he set off, and when you were left there on the beach, to be with those really magical, majestic animals, knowing that you could do nothing, that must have been heartbreaking.
Yeah, it was. It was the worst, probably the worst moment in my whole life, and to just feel completely useless and know that just the sheer impossibility of it all, and just, I mean, it's hard to express how remote this was. This is like a 3-4 day hike in, and it depends on the tides, and there's no boats and there's no reception, and it's like how I knew with whale rescues, it's just like impossible to do with hundreds of people, and here we were in a place where there was no help, and it was getting dark, and high tide was in the middle of the night, and the winds were horrible. And when I had that realization, I just sort of sank down and screamed and just started crying, because it was just, you felt so useless, and I just knew deep down they were all going to die, and I could just see them, and I was with them in the water, and they're so beautiful, and it's just so wrong to see a whale out of the water. I don't know, it's just like seeing something that's just not right, like to see, and they look at you, their eyes look at you, and it was just horrific.
So waiting for him to get back and for the rangers to come back, that must have felt like a lifetime.
Yeah, it did. So I walked back in the dark, and I was completely soaked and windburnt and covered in sand and freezing, and I went back to our tent, and I basically just kept really busy, like cooking and tidying and stuff, and until they got back. And I was pretty exhausted as well, just from like being in the water with them, and every few minutes just trying to push them and stuff, and there's just nothing you could do. So it felt like hours. And then luckily the dock ranger, they have a bit of a quad bike that they use at their work, so he drove Julian back at night in the bike, which was awesome.
And when you woke up the next morning and went to see what the scene was, what was it like?
It was even worse. Those are the ones I haven't posted any photos of that, because it was just too awful. But that were completely out of the water, like maybe 5 or 10 meters away from the shore. It was low tide when we went out to see them, and they were mostly still alive at that point, and yeah, it was horrible.
And in the far north, where 8 pygmy whales beached themselves and a refloat attempt took place at Rarawa Beach this morning, all 8 whales were refloated, but 2 of them returned to the shore and had to be euthanized. The remaining 6 were this afternoon about 400 metres offshore and swimming. Volunteers are continuing to monitor them today.